morning, Americans. This is your favorite alien and Bull Moose Bubba here on Sunday, March 8th. We're sitting in for Paul Harvey today for the rest of the story. And hopefully, when you read the story, it'll make you guys think. I hope. Anyway, here it goes. Well, Americans, back in the year 1224 BCE of your time here, my ancestral planet was basically you. Our level of development, what you would call 21st century today, we had satellites, communications, technology galore. Some are a little better than yours. Uh, Weapons, we were nuclear weapon powerful at the time. And the scientists were trying to figure everything out from the universe to how to do people in a petri dish. Yes. Unlike you guys, we were looking at cloning. Yeah. Well, uh, we had also gone all out on our development that we made the atmosphere terrible because of the capitalism type of planetary system that we had. They called it profit. Our population was about 18 billion. 18 billion. The planet was a little bigger than Earth. It was 1.3 times your size. Our year in the ancestral planet was like 387 days of your days here was our year. Our day was a little shorter. Revolution was about your 22 hours, 50 minutes, something like that. Anyway, that was our ancestral planet. And in that year, 1224 BCE, you had four what you call major powers that ruled the planet. And one of the major powers had difficulty because it was overpopulated and it was losing territory fast to what you would call climate change. So it decided to build itself a climate change inducer. So it built a virus that ate carbon monoxide, is what you would call it here on Earth. And, well, the virus was similar to your E. coli here on Earth. So it launched it into space, and unfortunately it had a mishap, just like the Chinese did on theirs, and it launched it into the stratosphere instead of the ionosphere. Well, it developed what you would call coronavirus type symptoms all over the planet. And within a year and a half, the population went from 18 billion to 1.5 billion. That's a lot, huh? Yeah, 1.5 billion. So that threw the entire planetary situation into chaos, kind of a dark age. A lot of the nation states just ceased to exist and became back to simpler time. One nation state had the population because it didn't get affected that much. So it had a population of 200 million and it still had 75 million left. But it didn't have the population to continue it the way it was, so it had to go back to a lower form. So they went back to the 1920s, what you would call the 1920s. And for the next 800 years, the population slowly grew from 1.5 billion. 800 years later, you had 2 billion. Took it that long to get to 2 billion. Yeah. And then it went to 2.5 billion with another 400 years. So you had 2.5 billion. So you're looking at 1,200 years. So that by the time of Christ, in your time here, we were back to 2.5 billion. So they started to redevelop the stuff that they had 2,000 or 1,200 years or so. And by the time of, say, Justinian here, 500 AD, 565 around there, the population had gone up to 3.2 billion. Well, and they were back up to almost 20th century standards. Between 565 and 900 AD, your time, the population grew from 3.5 billion to 12 billion. And we had surpassed your level of technology. We had gotten antimatter, and we're starting to build ships to go into the solar system and out. We had rudimentary star drives, which we could go to the nearest star system. It took us a while. It took us a year to get there. But still, can you imagine if you can go from here to Alpha Centauri in a year? Well, that's what it was. But anyway, by the year 999 AD, population was back up to 14 billion. But you hadn't changed the way of thinking. You still were the ancestors of 1224 BCE. And 25 of us decided we can't handle this no more. We're heading the same road with dangerous antimatter this time. So they decided to find a new home. And 75 years later, they left. And 500,000 people left with them. 75 years after that, boom, planet disappeared. They never learned their lesson, even though they had that pandemic. And that's what I'm saying. You guys will never learn your lesson here. Because they never knew how to handle the pandemic there. You guys don't know how to handle it here. Anyway, this is your favorite alien, Bubba, sitting in for Paul Harvey today. And now you know the rest of the story.